Alrighty, folks, welcome back to Technical Knockout, the MMA podcast. Today we are gonna recap real quick the Royval versus Taira card, but more importantly, we're gonna talk about Fluffy Hernandez versus Michelle Pereira, which looks like an awesome fight at middleweight. But first things first, let's go over what happened last weekend. We had an awesome flyweight main event between Brandon Royval and Tatsuro Taira. We also came back in the winning column. We went 4-1 on the picks, so pretty solid stuff there. Happy to see that get done. Feels good to be back, baby. But yeah, so I mean, Royval gave Taira his toughest fight so far for sure. I gave him his first loss. I thought it was an awesome matchup. A lot of back and forth momentum swings. We called it pretty accurately in the preview pod. I was talking about how Taira was going to have trouble with the volume and accuracy of Royval on the feet. And if Taira was able to get the fight to the ground, I could see him controlling long portions of the fight there because his top game is so great. And that's pretty much how it played out. You know, Taira had a couple of close submission attempts. Royval had a lot of really good striking work, especially in the third round, and I think it was the fifth round as well. So, yeah, I mean, it was an awesome fight. It was back and forth. Definitely one to watch. People are talking about Fight of the Year contender. I mean, there was a lot of really great fights this year, but I think it's in the short list for sure. It's probably top five. But, yeah, awesome fight for Taira. It sucks to see him, take an L here, but, I mean, honestly, the dude is super young. I think he's like 24 or 25, so, give him some time. He'll be back fighting and losing to Brandon Royval, who, just had a title fight not that long ago, and just beat the former champion in Moreno. Really not much shame there in losing to that guy. So, for Royval, I think title fight or bust. They're doing Kaya Sakura versus Alexandre Pantoja, which I love that fight. I'm so excited to break that fight down stylistically. But I think it makes all the sense in the world to have Royval fight the winner of that. I think, if Moreno beats Albazi, then, I mean, we just saw Royval beat Moreno, so it makes sense to put Royval right in there. If Albazi beats Moreno, we have a little bit more of a discussion to be made. Maybe they make Albazi Royval, but I don't know. I kind of see Moreno getting past Albazi, honestly. And Kai Kara France is right there as well. So, I mean, we're kind of in a really good state right now with flyweight, Flyweight is one of the top divisions in the sport, in my opinion. I'd probably go bantamweight, lightweight, flyweight, middleweight, and welterweight right now is like the best divisions in the UFC. Featherweight is great too, but I don't know. I feel like I'll probably put featherweight over middleweight. But yeah, flyweight's it's in a resurgence era for sure. And I'm happy that the UFC didn't get rid of it when they were talking about that, because we would have awesome fights like the one that happened this weekend. So for Taira, I think he takes maybe a fight against somebody like Ursig, or, maybe the loser of Moreno Albazi. I think keep him in that top 8 range. Yeah, good problems to have. Jin Young Park beat Brad Tavares. It was a split decision, but I thought it was pretty clear that Park won the second and third round. I mean, you can even argue that he won the first. It's hard to argue, against it because of that knockdown that came in early. But I think he beat him up the rest of the round, so Tavares looked good. He had a good jab, like he always does. He had good takedown defense, like he always does. But Park just had the better cardio. He had the more pressure, more pace, and just pulled it out as the fight went on. Chidi Njokuani put on probably the best clinch striking performance I've seen in MMA since Anderson Silva knocked out Rich Franklin. Amazing work in the clinch here against Jared Gooden, and really didn't give him any chance in the fight. So shouts out to Chidi Njokuani for getting that done. That was an awesome performance. Grant Dawson came out and was very aggressive against Rafa Garcia. Surprise of the week for sure. So shouts out to Grant Dawson for, picking up where people have been telling him to pick up, and, putting in that ground and pound and pressure on the ground instead of just trying to hold the position like he did against Sabatini in his last fight. If this is the guy that shows up every time he fights, I think we have another great contender at lightweight. So we'll see what happens. D-Rod and Alex Morono had a very predictable fight where it came down to volume or power. I had D-Rod winning the second and third round. I was happy that the judges gave it to him. There was a lot of split decisions on this card where I felt like they shouldn't have been, but D-Rod by decision cashed for us. Ramazan Temirov knocked out CJ Vergara. Pat Sabatini took the back of Jonathan Pierce very quickly and choked him out. Themba Gorimbo had his hands full with Nico Price, but won very convincingly. Junior Tafa and Sean Sharaf had a firefight. It looked like Tafa was going to get finished in the first round, but then second round comes out and Sharaf was absolutely exhausted, and Tafa was able to get the finish there. Julia Pilastri and Corey McKenna had a very close fight in which they cut Corey McKenna afterwards, which I felt like was a little bit harsh, but I could see, signing her to Invicta and having her get a few more wins there and then coming back. Cody Haddon and Daniel Argueta had a pretty good fight where Haddon just had the more volume and more power versus Argueta's wrestling. And then Clayton Carpenter picked up that submission early in the night where he tapped, or not tapped out, but choked out to sleep Luis Roca. So pretty awesome card altogether. Some good finishes, some good fights, couple weird decisions, but I think the right guy won in every circumstance. So even though it was a roundabout way to get there, the judges were able to get the right person to get their hand raised, so that was good. Not much more to discuss there. Let's break down the upcoming fight night in the Apex again. This time we're going to middleweight for our main event, and we have Anthony Hernandez, Fluffy, versus Michel Pereira. This is an awesome matchup, honestly. I mean, I feel like I could sit here and, wax poetic about this fight for 25 minutes on its own. There are some other fights on the card I want to get to, though. But let's start off with that main event because it's a pretty freaking sweet one. So you have Fluffy Hernandez, who's on like a 7-fight win streak or something. I don't know. I can't remember the last time he lost. Let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-fight win streak in the UFC. Most of them finishes. Just an absolute drowner. I've seen him be referred to as the middleweight Merab. I think that's an accurate description, but he has a lot more finishing ability than Merab, as his record shows. Somebody that looks for the submission in a lot of positions, but is very happy to just drown you in cardio and wrestling and pace and pressure. Maybe not the most explosive or athletic fighter, but it hasn't been a problem for him yet. He's kind of just been beating these dudes up as the fight goes on. I mean, I remember his fight with Roman Kopylov. I was very worried for him in that matchup, and he ended up pulling that out. That was his last fight. He also finished Edmund Shabazian. He finished Marc-Andre Barriault. Went to decision with Josh Fremd, but has a submission victory over Rodolfo Vieira, which is as big a feather in a cap as you can get in MMA. So, the guy is very well rounded, but his grappling and his top pressure are really stand out. I would put him on the level of like a Merab or Bilal as far as the top pressure goes, but more finishing ability for sure. Jack Slack just put out a film room study on his guillotine and his front headlock entry. So if you guys are subscribed to Jack Slack, which I'm sure you are if you're subscribed to my podcast, if you're subscribed to Jack Slack as well, definitely check out that film room study because it was very informative. And, you can see kind of that submission prowess that Hernandez has. And even if he doesn't finish the fight with those submissions, he uses those submissions to maintain top position or get to a position where he can, ride out the rest of the round. So he takes on Michel Pereira here, who has had a insane career in the UFC. Honestly, I mean, this is like one that is definitely going to be a fighter to look back on, a fighter to do a career retrospective on at some point. Simply because of the just insanity of how everything's played out. So Michel Pereira came into the UFC at welterweight, I believe, and he was famous on the regional scene for doing like backflips off of the cage, front flip, kicks to the head, rolling thunders, backflips on his opponent's stomach, like just all kinds of crazy, explosive, wild, outlandish shit. Flying knees, of course. The dude is super athletic. He hits really hard and very creative in there with the striking. So when he came into the UFC, that was what he was touted on. That was what his highlight reel looked like. He came in, he knocked out, oh man, what's the guy's name? He got knocked out by Mike Perry too. Danny Roberts, I believe, the British dude. He knocked him out with he threw like a flying knee that backed him up and then just like cracked him with a piston of a right straight. It was like, oh man, this guy's gonna be a problem. And he won another fight, I believe, and then he ran into Tristan Connolly. Now Tristan Connolly is a featherweight who was going up 2 weight classes on short notice to fight Michel Pereira. Now, I think Michel Pereira learned a very valuable lesson in this fight, which is don't blow your wad early. Don't expect that you're going to win just because you're so much bigger and stronger than this guy. He had like a 6 minute walkout, Michel Pereira, where he did a whole bunch of dancing, a whole bunch of flips. Got in the cage, he was doing a bunch of weird shit, a bunch of flips, a bunch of capoeira type shit. And he got exhausted. You know, he definitely won the first round, but then he got exhausted. And, you know, Tristan Connolly was able to maintain top position on him and just kind of beat him up from the top position for the last second and third round. And he won that decision on short notice, up 2 weight classes. You know, this is a guy who was like working on a construction site before that. And then he went on to have like a very okay UFC career, Tristan Connolly. And Michel Pereira has just improved leaps and bounds since that fight. So he learned a very valuable lesson in that fight about not being a complete wild man all the time. Underneath the smoke and mirrors of his front kicks and flying knees and rolling thunders and backflips, there is a very solid straight right hand and very good timing and explosiveness on Michel Pereira's side. So yeah, underneath all that smoke and mirrors, all that weird stuff that he does, he had a very solid straight right hand and very good timing and explosiveness. So, you know, the guy is he's super athletic. I think this is a great matchup because you have one guy who, on paper, when you see him, the eye test, he's huge, he's ripped, he's super athletic, he's super explosive. But the skills that he has match up very well to the other guy who looks very unassuming, who looks like, you know, it looks like a bodybuilder versus a gangster, like like the type of gangster you see in like South Central who is gonna run and not even gonna run after you, who's just gonna pop you, you know. Not taking anything away from Anthony Hernandez, but I mean that's just like the body type, you know what I mean? Obviously, Hernandez has the much better grappling. He has the wrestling. He has the jiu-jitsu for sure. On the feet, he has a serviceman like striking approach where he likes to double and triple up on the jab. He pushes his guy to the back, his guys back to the fence, and he works his grappling from there. Michel Pereira, on the other hand, super explosive, throwing flying knees, throwing front kicks, throwing big right hands down the middle. Has certainly improved in his defensive grappling, but obviously it's not something that he's grown up doing. It's not something that he is as well versed as Anthony Hernandez is. So this is where the matchup comes down to. It's kind of like a fire and ice kind of thing, you know? I mean, both guys fight fire with fire, but you know what I'm trying to say. Very different styles that clash very well. I'm really excited to see how it plays out. I think the odds have him as a pick'em. If anything, I would have expected them to have Hernandez as a favorite just because of the strength of schedule. But Michel Pereira has looked incredible since moving up from welterweight to middleweight. He's looked really good. He finished Michal Oleksiejczuk. He finished Ihor Potieria. He finished Andre Petroski. And the thing about all these finishes is that they're all in 1 minute. So, I mean, Hernandez, it's been a long time since he's been finished. I think the last time was against Kevin Holland, which was also in 1 minute. So, I mean, you know, he's somebody that has gotten caught early in the fight before. If Michel Pereira can continue his winning ways and get that early rush, that bum rush on him, not let Hernandez get into the fight, it's going to be a very short night for Anthony Hernandez in that case. But if Michel Pereira cannot find that early finish, if he is forced to fight a more reserved game, if he can't find those big punches or explosions early, I expect Hernandez to do horrible things to him on the ground. You know, if we saw somebody, I mean, I know this was like 5-6 years ago, but if we saw somebody like Tristan Connolly hold you down and beat you up, I can only imagine what Anthony Hernandez is going to do to him. So, in my opinion, and I think a lot of the pundits are going to agree when their prediction videos come out and stuff, I haven't really tested the market too much on this matchup, but my opinion, I think it's going to be Michel Pereira first round, or Anthony Hernandez beating the piss out of him until he gets like a second, third, fourth round submission. Either way, I don't expect this fight to go the distance. I'll be very surprised if we see the judges' scorecards on this matchup. If we do, it's probably going to be like a weird fight where Michelle Pereira just fights point scoring wise and keeps on the outside. But I do think with the apex cage, with the small cage, I think you have to take that into account here because both guys, they want to be in their opponent's face typically. And I think it's going to be a very violent matchup. And I'm really happy to see this fight top the bill for a fight night. I think it's an awesome matchup to have for 5 rounds. Even though I don't expect it to go 5 rounds, I think it's very interesting if we see Hernandez survive the first 2 rounds and start to pour it on in the third and fourth. That fifth round is going to be really interesting to see. So I'm really excited to see how this fight shakes out. Prediction wise, I am leaning towards Hernandez, but again, I can see Pereira just smoking him early with something crazy in the first 2 minutes of the fight. I wouldn't be surprised. Michelle Pereira seems to have the higher athletic ceiling for sure. Hernandez, I think, is the more proven fighter and the guy whose style will do better against the top of the division, but I don't know if he'll be able to reach that top of the division. You know what I mean? There's a lot of fighters that have been like that throughout, the history of the sport, where he matches up really well against the top 3 or 4 guys in the division, but getting there is a little bit tougher. And I think this matchup is a perfect example of that because Pereira is going to bring everything that is the antidote to Hernandez, and Hernandez is bringing everything that's the antidote to Pereira. So I'm pumped on it. I'm really excited for the fight. I'll probably end up just going with the under 3.5 or something like that. But yeah, awesome fight. Great matchmaking there. Co-main event, you have Rob Font versus Kyler Phillips. I don't mean to shortchange it or not delve too deep into the breakdown side of things, but I think this is a pretty easy fight to predict. I think Kyler Phillips is going to put so much volume and pressure and weird strikes on Rob Font and maybe hurt him at some point but not get a finish for sure. And I expect Kyler Phillips to win this fight by decision. If Rob Font can put his foot down again and turn back another prospect, I'd be very surprised. This is not the kind of this isn't Adrian Yanez who's going to wade into the pocket with his hands low and eat shots. Kyler Phillips is very movement based. He's out there. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's Factory X or the MMA Lab. Yeah, the MMA Lab, who's putting out great fighters, guys like Mario Bautista, Marcus McGee, Kyler Phillips. So, these are very smart fighters, and I expect Kyler Phillips to win this fight pretty convincingly on the scorecards. Charles Johnson versus Sumudaerji. I did not expect this fight for Charles Johnson coming off of that huge knockout victory over Joshua Van. I thought they'd give him a higher step up in the rankings. But, flyweight is a relatively deep division, I suppose. And they give him Sumudaerji in an action fight. So, I think this is another easy one to predict. I think Charles Johnson is the crisper fighter of the two. I think he does a lot better as the fight goes on. I think Sumudaerji fades as the fight goes on. So I expect Charles Johnson to get this done in the second or third round, if not win a decision based on those last 2 rounds. I think the first round is going to be a good one to watch because Johnson's a little bit of a slow starter and Sumudaerji is a bit of a fast starter, but I don't expect Sumudaerji to be able to get him out of there early, and I think it's going to be a fun striking matchup where we see Charles Johnson pull ahead late. So I'm going to go with Charles Johnson over 1.5. I think that's a pretty safe bet here. Darren Elkins versus Daniel Pineda. I love this fight. This is a great matchup between 2 veterans. Darren Elkins looks to be pretty shot out, honestly. The guy can't take as good a punch as he used to, but he's coming off of a victory over TJ Brown where he was able to ride out the early storm and finish him in the third round when Brown got exhausted. Daniel Pineda is somebody that gets exhausted. We've seen him get finished in the second and third round before, or at least lose those 2-3 rounds against grapplers especially, so this is a solid matchup. It's kind of like a watered-down version of Michelle Pereira versus Anthony Hernandez, honestly, with Darren Elkins being the grinder and Daniel Pineda being the more explosive fighter. But both of these guys have like 10 plus years more experience than the main eventers do. But yeah, so I think it comes down to that. I think Pineda either catches him very early with his very crisp boxing and his decent power. I think it's very possible for him to knock out Elkins early in this fight. I think it's also equally possible for him to hurt Elkins and not be able to find the finish, and then Elkins be able to drown him in the second and third whenever Pineda gets a little bit more tired. So I think it's either going to be an Elkins late finish or a Pineda early finish. So I'll probably end up going the fight doesn't go the distance. I think that's probably a safer bet. I could see Elkins winning a decision here, but I do think if Daniel Pineda gets it done, it's going to be early in the fight. Next is Mateus Nicolau versus Asu Almabayev. This is a pretty solid fight again between striker and grappler. I'm not really convinced on either side here, so I'm probably just going to bet the over because I think both guys are very tough. Going to the prelims, you have Brad Katona versus John Matsumoto. I am a huge fan of Brad Katona, and I like to pick him by decision against everybody he fights, but he is fighting a very tough fighter here in John Matsumoto, who kind of has the antidote to his style. He has a very good submission game. He has very good power in his hands, and he's fought and beat grindy wrestlers like Dan Argueta and other guys with that style before. So Brad Katona will have his hands full this weekend, and the odds reflect that. I love Brad Katona's style. I love his fight IQ. I mean, maybe not the most exciting, but a very solid fighter everywhere, and especially in the wrestling department. So, tough matchup for him. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get it done by decision, but I think the Matsumoto side is probably the better side with his explosiveness and finishing capabilities. He'll probably be able to put more damage on Katona as the fight goes on, and if not find the finish, be able to win a decision based on damage and big moments. So Matsumoto is probably the safer bet, but I think I'm going to go over 1.5 either way, as both guys are very tough. Jocelyn Edwards versus Tamiris Vidal. This fight's gonna suck. It's definitely gonna go to decision. Not much more to say there. I mean, if you can get the prop on the split decision, the way these judges have been going the last few weeks, I'd probably go with that fight to be won by split decision on either side. Jessica Penne versus Elise Reed. Solid matchup here. Elise Reed has very good striking, very good kicks, but her grappling has been a little bit suspect. And Jessica Penne, as old and veteran status as she is, has pulled out her jiu-jitsu game and her wrestling game as big tools for her in this late stage of her career. So this is a good matchup for her, but probably one where she's going to end up getting out-athleticked by the younger and more agile Elise Reed. So I'm going to go with Elise Reed by decision here because Penne is very tough. Melissa Martinez versus Alice Ardaline. I'm happy to see Ardaline get another shot. She showed a lot of heart in that first fight against Shauna Bannon. Shauna Bannon is not very good. I expected Ardaline to win that matchup. Melissa Martinez also not very good. So I'm going to side with the slight underdog here in Alice Ardaline. I think she's a bit scrappier. And if she gets going earlier in this fight, where she wasn't able to in the last one, I think probably because of the camp, the short notice nature of it, I expect her to do some good work here if she can get going early and kind of outwill and outscrap her opponent. Austin Lane versus Robelis Despain is a very funny matchup, I think, at heavyweight to open up this card, and I love to see this. So Austin Lane is a former NFL defensive end, I believe, and came to the UFC and to fight Greg Hardy, pretty much. I think they fought him on the Contender Series, and then went and had a few more wins after getting knocked out by Greg Hardy. And pretty much the book is out. He has a big right hand. He has a pretty decent left hook, honestly, but he does not have a good chin. Doesn't have a good chin and doesn't appear to have any good cardio either. He got knocked out by one of the Tafa brothers in his last fight. I think they had a 2-fight affair because there was an eye poke. And then got knocked out by Jonathan Deniz, who looks pretty solid. And now he's taking on Robelis Despain, who can't stop a double leg to save his life, but throws really hard and hits people really hard in the first few seconds of the fight. I think he was like a silver medalist in Taekwondo or something like that. So, dude is huge too. He's like 6'7". I was pretty high on him until he fought Waldo Cortez Acosta, which in retrospect was too much too soon for him. I think this is a better matchup for him. I expect Robelis Despain to get the knockout here. Even if Austin Lane can get him down, he's not a very good finisher from the top, and he gets very tired. So even if Austin Lane can get him down, I expect him to get exhausted in the second round, and Robelis to be able to finish him in an exchange on the feet. First or second round, I think it's probably a good bet to put Robelis under half a round, considering how most of his fights have gone, and considering the chin that we've seen from Lane be a little bit suspect. So I'm going to take a stab at Robelis under half a round, very early in the fight, first 2 minutes of the fight or so. But I think it's probably a safer bet to put him by knockout first or second round. All right. So let's go down the betting slip for the fight night this weekend. Main event, I'm going to go under 3.5 on either side. I think either Michelle Pereira by knockout or Hernandez by submission. Co-main event, I'm taking Kyler Phillips by decision pretty confidently there. I'll take Charles Johnson over 1.5. I'll go over 1.5 in the Katona Matsumoto fight. I'm going to put the Edwards fight, Edwards Vidal, and Reed Penne to both go to decision. And I'll take Robelis Despain by knockout in the first round. So over it all, we're going to go under 3.5 in the main event. Phillips by decision. Johnson over 1.5. We're going to go over 1.5 in general for the Katona fight. We're going to go fight to go decision in the Edwards and Reed fight. And then Robelis Despain by first round knockout. So I think it's a solid bet to put all the women's fights on this card to go the distance. I could see it happening, and even the Brad Katona fight for those fights to go to the distance. I could see all that happening. It's a solid bet to put the fight to not go the distance in the main event and in the first fight of the night. So, I mean, do with that what you will. Maybe not the best card to bet on, but I do think that there's a few fights on here that are going to be really exciting, namely the main event. The main event is awesome, so I'm really happy that they put that together. I am still working on the Alexei Oleinik retrospective piece. I'm kind of confused on which direction to take it because there's so much to talk about with that guy, and I'm really excited to get it out, and I want to do it the right way, But I appreciate y'all for watching. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we keep our winning ways rolling, y'all. All right, much love. Peace out.